This week on The Record, the auditor arrives. How a public push for an investigation into the flawed North St. Louis grant program won a big boost from a public official. Condemned, the city's aggressive push to fix up faltering homes comes not with a wrecking ball, but a construction crew. Is it stabilizing properties or, as skeptics fear, stealing them in slow motion? Josh Hawley's campaign swings through the suburbs of St. Louis. One of the most powerful political figures in Illinois history goes on trial. But first, can Midwestern Democrats make the case for Kamala Harris? Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski is on the record. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Tightening polls across the country suggest whoever wins the White House next month could arrive in the Oval Office with a rare challenge for an incoming president, a divided Congress. 12 of our last 13 presidents came into power with one party running both chambers. The prospect of a divided Congress looks increasingly possible, though, of course, a long way from certain. Amid the struggle for control of Congress and the balance of power, Republicans have all but surrendered Illinois' 13th congressional district. Incumbent Democrat Nikki Budzinski, once a budget director for President Biden, has outraised her Republican challenger, a newcomer, more than 100-1 in outside donations. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski is running for re-election to a second term after a first full term in Congress. Thank you for joining us on The Record.
Happy to be here.
Vice President Kamala Harris seems to be struggling to distinguish how she would be different than Joe Biden if America elects her. She said the one thing that might be different is she would put a Republican in her cabinet. I don't know who you think might be best suited for a job like that, but do you think Americans want more of the same?
I think people want more civility in their government. I think they want a government that is going to be about results, bringing people together, working with people regardless of political party. I think that's what people want in Washington, more of less hyperpartisanship. I would say my first term in office, I think you could agree with this, Mark, has been marked by a lot of hyperpartisanship. And I think people want less political noise. So I think that that's the case that I think Vice President Harris is trying to make, is more civil discourse, more meeting in the middle. I think that's what people want.
Is that how you explain some of her changes in position toward the middle?
I really support the work that she has done to support American manufacturing. It's something that the Biden-Harris administration has really been focused on. She's talking a lot about how to provide middle-class tax relief. That's something that has been a priority of the previous administration and what she wants to continue to lead on. I think those are the things that are impacting people's pocketbooks. It's about kitchen table issues. And so I think those are the types of issues that she's talking about and putting a vision forward that's positive in getting things done for working people in this country.
You had said for months, maybe even more than a year, that the Biden administration needed to do more at the southern border. Now we've seen what the impact of doing more looks like. In fact, there are fewer border crossings now than there were at the end of the Trump administration, but not until after a 3-year record surge. I know Congress could have taken action. But doesn't this prove that the executive branch also bears the blame?
I don't think that any one branch of government, I think we all need to be doing more. I applaud this administration for the work that they've recently done around cracking down on some of the folks that are seeking asylum, coming into this country, creating a more orderly process and creating more order at the border. I think that is very important, and the administration has finally taken action. I agree with you. I've been a little negative about the fact that they've been slow to respond, but I think Congress does need to act. I mean, this is one of the big issues that has been incredibly frustrating. It feels like House Republicans in particular are more interested in scoring cheap political points on behalf of Donald Trump's candidacy than really resolving the issue of immigration reform. This is an important issue. We have a broken immigration system. I actually believe that the issues at the border, which I have supported, more funding for Border Patrol agents, more funding for technology, that all is just a symptom of the larger problem, which is this country has a broken system that we need to fix.
And of course, for our viewers, Congress can take permanent action. No president can take permanent action. That would just be temporary. I want to shift now to disaster recovery. A lot of Americans are watching the catastrophic storms devastating parts of North Carolina and Florida. You've seen flooding impact closer to home in the Metro East. Are you confident in moments like this that FEMA is acting with enough urgency?
Yes, I have. I do believe that. I think you are seeing that in FEMA's response to Hurricane Helene. I think we will see that same response with Hurricane Milton. I think that it does require resources, fully funding FEMA is something that is critically important in order for them to have the resources that they need to respond to communities in need. We have had some of those communities.
Do they have enough money?
Well,
FEMA?
I would say, you know, during the continuing resolution, when we kicked the can down the road for the 5th time, and instead of getting a full and complete federal budget, House Republicans wanted to cut $10 to $20 billion out of FEMA's budget. House Democrats were not in control of the House, but we argued that it should be fully funded. And what ended up passing out of the House was a cut to FEMA. So I think that there were some rumors about us having to go back to Washington to make sure FEMA's fully funded.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It didn't make it into the actual final budget, did it, those cuts?
It did not. The cuts actually were a part of the continuing resolution.
Okay.
And so there were concerns around FEMA having the full budget that it needed to respond to Hurricane Elaine. Now we have to wait and see what's going to happen with the impacts of Hurricane Milton, but we might have to go back.
Sure. Just on process, though, I think people watch and want to know how to make sense of the timeline. For example, in July, we saw the floods in Oakey Heights and Belleville and all the area. In September, a couple months later, we saw the president issue a disaster declaration. Not until October, the month later, a span of 4 months, do we see the Recovery Center pop up, and people are getting aid and important work is being done there. But how should voters think about that 4-month, can we call it a delay? Or I know these things don't happen overnight.
Oh, right, and they don't happen overnight, and it is a partnership at the state level. The first thing that has to happen is the governor has to declare a disaster declaration, which he has done in this case. Then we have to collectively advocate at the federal level for the disaster declaration to happen. Those are the steps in the process, and those steps are actually taking place. What we are offering as an office with district offices in the Metro East area is for constituents that have concerns, would like to file some type of, an assessment of how their property was impacted. We want to be of assistance to that, and we will be a bridge between them and FEMA to make sure that they get the resources they need.
I want to shift gears here with the time we have left here. Congress allowed recently the Farm Bill to expire, and it looks like that won't be resolved until after the election in the new Congress, unless you know something I don't. What does it mean for farmers and for American food supply if Republicans are to take control of both chambers of Congress?
Well, look, I think we're in a good place to potentially, hopefully, take back the House majority in November. So we will see what the makeup of the House and the Senate looks like, and obviously the presidency as well.
But the disagreement was on a proposed $30 billion in cuts to the food stamps or SNAPs.
That was one really important element to it. But I will just say, historically, no farm bill has successfully passed that is not bipartisan. What happened and came out of the House committee that I serve on, the House Agriculture Committee, was a deeply partisan bill that I would argue played favorites, regional favorites, specifically supporting more of the southern commodities, which are peanut, cotton, and rice, not corn and soybean. We have a lot of corn and soybean growers in the Midwest. I want to make sure it's an equitable farm bill. But I also think your point is really important. There was in their proposal $30 billion of SNAP cuts. These are working people that are struggling to make ends meet. SNAP provides a small subsidy to help them put food on their tables. $30 billion of cuts from the House Republicans. And not only just that, but real concerns around conservation funding. There was a lot of conservation money, $14 billion moved into the Farm Bill to support conservation efforts by our farmers. The House Republicans wanted to take some of that and, again, move it to our southern commodities. I want to make sure this is an equitable farm bill that supports our farmers and supports working people. So that's what I hope we get to.
I wish we had more time. We have to leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're back in a moment.
To the campaign trail now, Senator Josh Hawley rallied Republicans in Cottleville Thursday around the cost of living.
I bet your mortgage is too expensive. I bet your rent is too expensive. I bet you can't afford your car payment.
Hawley's been hammering out the early drafts of his new populist economic message, like when he pivoted to scold his own party in this recent speech to a conservatism conference.
Look, we're about to have a big debate about extending tax cuts. Maybe we should start with this question. Why should labor ever be taxed more than capital? They should not be.
MOX reporter Sean Malone reminded Hawley how he praised former President Donald Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy as, quote, the right way forward when he was running for that job in 2017.
Earlier this summer, you said, why should labor ever be taxed more than capital,
Yes.
which is the opposite of the Trump tax plans that you championed when you first ran for Senate. So when did
No,
you change
I
your
wasn't there for. Well, I wasn't there for the Trump tax cuts in 2017.
I believe you said they were the right way.
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there to vote on it, but I'd stand by my remarks that you just read.
And a response from the Lucas Kunz campaign. He said Josh Hawley didn't just support tax cuts for corporations 6 years ago. He ran on them and asks, has any senator ever had more trouble coming up with a real reason why they deserve to be reelected? Their debate coming up soon. Opening statements are expected to begin in the corruption trial of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. Jury selection getting underway just this last week. The former House Speaker charged in a federal racketeering and bribery scheme. Prosecutors say it involved the state's largest electric and utility company, ComEd. Madigan he's accused of using his influence to pass legislation favorable to that company in return for favors. He's pleaded not guilty. St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones and her building division are slapping more than 100 so-called absentee owners of neglected properties with big bills for costly repairs. Instead of crushing the condemned properties with a wrecking ball, she's sending a crew of contractors.
If owners fail to make needed repairs, the city will exercise our right to hire contractors to complete this work and send the absentee owner a bill. The threat of this program has motivated 18 owners to complete the work themselves.
But some of these owners in North City fear they can't afford those payments and might have to surrender their treasured property to the highest bidder or the city's land bank at a tax sale. Fred Lewis owns the old JCPenney building in North City. He was shocked when he found a contractor on the city payroll using a crowbar trying to break into his front door.
But for a city to take it on their own to determine they want to take your building and attach liens on it because of bogus reasons is crazy to me.
Also in North City, when we come back, we hear from a local lawmaker calling for the state auditor to look into the St. Louis Development Corporation. Welcome back. Mayor Tashara Jones just last week admitted flaws in the way the St. Louis Development Corporation awarded tens of millions of dollars worth of federal grants to North City businesses. Now those grant awards are under internal review and a state audit to boot. House Democrat Steve Butts is now on the record. Thank you for joining us. You know, a lot of people in North City were passing petitions trying to persuade the auditor to come out and investigate these federal funds that are going through the St. Louis Development Corporation, but you had something of a trump card.
Yeah, no pun intended there, I hope so.
No.
Mark, nice to be on the show, but I'll say, sure, one of the advantages of being in the legislature for the past 6 years and building some relationships when you need to get through to someone that could help with an issue in the city or statewide, you can do that. So I was able to put in a call and get an appointment with the state auditor's office.
Now, elephant in the room here. You're a Democrat.
I am.
The state auditor is a Republican. Do you trust him to handle this on an even keel and give a nonpartisan review of what's going on here?
I do. In particular, Auditor Fitzpatrick has a stellar reputation in Jeff City, both sides of the aisle. I don't think you'll have anybody giving you any trouble on that issue. And the auditor's office, historically, is when they're doing their official function, it's nonpartisan. So,
can you make the argument that having cops on the beat, as it were, these auditors coming in, can alter behavior?
During the distribution, I certainly hope so, and I think it has already proven to be so. So Neil Richardson has said, you know, there's a pause. We're going to double check, triple check these grants, for example, in this one program that we're talking about here. But sure, I think that's the whole point of having the audit.
You use the word pause, and to some people's ears at City Hall, that's a painful word these days because time is ticking. There's a short runway to get these federal funds out the door and into neighborhoods. Do you have any concern that bringing an auditor in at this stage could further delay the delivery of these funds?
No, because I want that money to be properly spent. I can't imagine it being spent in an irresponsible manner, not being used where it's most needed. I'm sure I know the clock's ticking, but holy cow, I mean, this clock's been ticking for a couple of years. There's no surprise here. So how we can be getting into the 11th hour kind of surprises me on the first hand, but there is time to get it done right. And I think it's important to the taxpayers and the people of North St. Louis to make sure it is done properly.
What is your current understanding of the vetting process that existed or did not properly exist as the funds were being awarded in the first round?
Yeah, my current understanding, again, I have no inside baseball info here, but there was a third-party vendor, and I believe the name was Grow USA, that was awarded a contract by SLDC to help them implement these grants. I think this is a grant program that SLDC was not set up for. This is a huge amount of money. It's never happened before. It should be transformational money. And clearly one of the issues was this vendor, Grow USA, improperly doing their work.
I don't know that a vendor like that could have necessarily been in a position to do that had it always stayed within government, had government been the one doing the vetting. And outsourcing it, they kind of outsourced the accountability factor too.
I had emailed Neil Richardson. He answered back, and I just mentioned that as one of my points from a personal level. When you lead an organization, to deflect blame because of a third-party vendor that you hired, I think that rings shallow in most people's ears.
Do you agree, and do you buy at face value the claim that Neil Richardson and Mayor Tashara Jones are making before the business community just last week, that the legal and the compliance metrics of this grant program are unaffected?
You know, I was at that luncheon where the speeches were given by both the mayor and Neil Richardson, and I would say that rang hollow to me. I did not think that to be true. I think it is going to be affected.
A little straight talk here. You're from South City.
I am, my whole life.
This program is solely intended for North City.
Yeah.
What's your interest in North City?
I'm a member of the legislature. I'm a lifelong St. Louisan. I don't consider myself a South St. Louisan. I consider myself a St. Louisan. Anything that improves the life, health, wealth, well-being in North St. Louis benefits all of us in the city.
So you
and
want the
region.
funds to be spent there?
I do. If you look around St. Louis, where is the greatest need? Clearly it's there. Are there parts, even in my district, like Dutchtown, for example, or Bevo? Sure, we've got challenges too, but for this program and this amount of money, there will be money spent all over the city. But this was a stimulus grant program specific for small businesses in North St. Louis.
I don't know that you would put yourself in political league with the progressive reformer Megan Green, who's the president of the Board of Aldermen, but she had an interesting comment just this week in talking about how to divvy up these RAMS funds. She turned to a head of a big business group, the Greater St. Louis Inc., and said, what about you guys? I'll give you an example. In Detroit, Dan Gilbert and a lot of big finance guys pitched in a ton of money to help spark that city's comeback, and it's working. To what degree should the St. Louis business community partner up and not just go off on their own tangent, their own offshoot, but partner up truly and put money into a big endowment fund or put money into a collective pot and say, we're all going to do this together? Should that happen?
It should, absolutely.
To what degree?
Much more than we've ever done heretofore. You know, one thing, I'm a lifelong St. Louisan, and if I know there's one thing that we consistently do poorly, that's work together. And maybe there was a time when the city was so big we could go our own way, but that is no longer the case. And we've got one shot. I don't want to say it's the last shot for the city of St. Louis to have a real renaissance, but this is certainly part of it. And without leadership from the business community, and we've lost a lot of our really large corporate headquarters, and we've become more of a regional town, which is fine, but we can build from the strengths we do have, and there are many.
I wish we had more time. He's House Democrat Steve Butts, the state representative, in his maiden voyage here on The Record. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. It was a pleasure.
We're back in a moment. Election season is in full swing. Red states and blue states all lining up to send our votes to the Electoral College. The undecided voter is becoming something of an endangered species these days. And as dividing lines are being drawn in communities and families, perhaps you're finding yourself wondering, how could they believe that? Well, it turns out it's quite easy, really, especially in this information age. So let's check the record. A new study suggests the human brain starts out curious, then settles on an answer once it's found one. Satisfaction sets in. Confidence replaces curiosity when someone thinks they know it all. And sometimes people who feast on simple ideas, ones easy to digest, come across more confident than those who might consider the alternatives. After all, someone constantly challenging thoughts or thinking critically or carefully weighing what they know against what they don't, well, that person might not seem very confident, do they? But are they wrong just because they're uncertain about something? Psychologist Barry Schwartz summarized this new study saying, quote, "It's not just that people are wrong, it's that they are so confident in their wrongness. That's the problem." Ronald Reagan was riding the rock star waves of political popularity at the time when he poked fun at that whole notion by saying, quote, "The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so." So what do we do with this new study? How do we check for our own blind spots and make sure we're not wrong, and arrogantly so?
The prescription from Dr. Schwartz, be curious and humble. That's all our time this week. See you next week.